business. It'll range anywhere from 45 to 85% of the value of their net worth. So this topic is very important because at some point you're going to think about monetizing, the business, and we're going to talk about how that monetization works and how you can lever that, lever that up. It's also critical as a business owner. You can imagine you have vendors that you work with, maybe suppliers. And if one of those business owners and one of those suppliers goes out of business right away, how that can impact you. So this is really critical in regards to how you look at your business and as an asset on your balance sheet and how it impacts your family, as well as the people you do business with, because they have a relationship with your company. A lot of us made that decision. I don't know how everyone on the conference here, and this is a little more challenging. I'm used to doing more live presentations. So as an Italian, we like to use your hands a lot. I got to make sure I keep my eyes peeled on the slides here and click the buttons and make sure I don't go down a rabbit hole too soon or get too far ahead of myself. But a lot of us started our businesses for some reason. Didn't want to work for the boss man. I could do it better. The joke we always talk about is, hey, as a business owner, you could take half days, and I take half days off. I go, yeah, I work my 12 hours and then I get my other 12 hours off. And oh, by the way, that tends to be 6 days a week at least, not the typical 5. And I'm sure a lot of you can attest to that. So we're going to start diving in. I do have to, for legal reasons, not that I expect you to speed read this, but I have to give legal and disclosures that this is an educational seminar, and that any information you learn and you choose to apply, you should talk to your CPA, attorney, or other consultant. So we're going to start with someone whose face you'll probably recognize, Mr. Warren Buffett, considered to be one of the best value investors out there. He has a famous quote called, "Managers and investors alike must understand that accounting numbers are the beginning, not the end of a business valuation." And I can't really say, to do a show of hands here, but I'm curious if any of you have had a business valuation, and what do you think the point of that business valuation is? See, a lot of people, when I ask that question in a live seminar, think, oh yeah, I need to know what the number is, right? What the value of my business is. And I will tell you that, again, as Warren Buffett stated, that's just the beginning. Really what your business valuation is a report card. For those that remember going back to high school and college, we used to get those. And it used to tell us how are we comparing, how are we mastering the material, and how do we compare to our teammates, especially if you went to a college that like to use the bell curve as part of their grading system. So the reason, when you think about what a valuation expert does, is they're not just looking at the numbers on your balance sheet. They're not looking at your income statement. They're not looking at your 5 years of just your tax returns. They are taking your company and your industry and comparing your company to all the other companies that are similar to your company. And they're going to say, well, wait a minute, how does ABC company compare to your company? And the reason why I say it's a report card is there is a term that you're going to hear later on. It's called best in class. Now, we all know in our industry, we should know who our top competitors are. And I mentioned the bell curve earlier. There are companies that are the sweet spot, the high point of the bell curve. But then you have your really good companies tend to be the outliers. They're the leaders in the industry, people that we try to aspire to be like. It's like, well, how are they doing that? Man, I wish I could do that. How do I figure out how to be like them so I can, raise the bar of my organization? And that's the value of evaluation. It gives you a chance to look under the hood and tell yourself, wow, I'm really good here. I'm really weak here compared to my competitors. And if I want to change my valuation, you have to figure out how to take those weak areas in your organization and make them better. And that is really a key component that we're going to talk about later, because it always starts with the valuation. You can't figure out how to get better as an organization without knowing what you need to improve upon. And you need to have context. I mean, one of the things that was a challenge for me, when I started my company, and even earlier on, was, well, I feel like I'm doing okay. We're making money. Our top line's going, our bottom line's growing. We're adding employees, but like, how do I really compare? And the valuation gives you context. It gives you a chance to sit there and reflect. And it also should set the table for you to how you should work on your business. I mean, I'm sure you've heard that term before about working on your business, not in your business. And it's really hard, believe me. I have my own challenges trying to find time where I can sit back and reflect on what's going on in my business, because I'm out there trying to grow the company. I'm working with, helping mentor my employees. I'm trying to solve problems for my clients, all the same things that everyone on this call is trying to do. But the key component here that I would ask you to take away is that evaluation, if you have never had one, you should have one done, and you should have it done on a regular basis. And we're going to, talk about why you want to do that. But it leads into this whole process of looking at exit planning as a business strategy. So next slide I want to talk about are the 5 Ds. Some people could stretch this out and look at the 5 7s. I try to condense it down. But one of the things we have heard about as business owners is, if certain life events happen, what are we doing to protect ourselves? And it's really shocking that the number of clients that we've earned over the years that really have not dealt with these issues up front. Again, what happens if you die? What happens to the business? What happens to the debt? What happens to your clients? What happens to your family? I'm sure you don't want to put your family in a position now that they have to deal with your business or have to have a fire sale. So what is the plan if you as a sole practitioner passes away? But even if you have partners, right? If you have partners, okay, your partners probably don't want to be in business with your spouse. You do want to realize the value of your sweat equity and the value you've contributed to that company, that you want to go to your spouse and your children. So what is the plan, right? And we're going to talk about, how do you deal with, finding the money, the liquidity part of this. Disability is one that gets overlooked. If you become, and I'm not talking about the disability where, hey, I have to have a knee replacement. I'm out for a month or two. I'm talking about a disability that keeps you out for a year, maybe a year and a half, 2 years. Well, I'm sure as a business owner, you're going to want to continue to get paid. Well, that's a drain on the business, because now you're not working in the business. And if you have partners, that gets more trickier, because most likely you are contributing to the success of the company. Well, how do you take care of all that? So what is the plan? Divorce is another issue. Let's face it, in our country, the divorce rate's about 50%. And candidly, it's actually higher after age 50. And people ask me, well, why does it jump up like that? Well, candidly, the issue has to be more like, well, wait a minute, I've been married so long, I'm not really happy in this relationship, but I'm going to wait for the kids to exit or these life events to happen, and then I'm going to move on, because people are living a lot longer. And they sit there and say, well, wait a minute, I'm 55 years old, I got probably another 25, 30 years to live. Do I want to be with this person for the next 20 to 35 years? So that's another reason why divorce rate is much higher post age 50. But again, what's the plan? If your business is a major asset on your books and it's illiquid, it's not like you have an investment account with your advisor and you say, hey, I need to take out $100,000, liquidate these shares. How do you do that with your company, right? So again, what's the plan? Unless you have maybe a prenuptial agreement, but even with prenuptial agreements, a lot of the value increase during your time of marriage is usually associated and then ended up being split. So they might not get the original value, but any growth most likely will go to the spouse that's exiting. Disagreement, and this could I use this word a little loosely. Part of it's disagreement. Let's face it. We started business with some friends. We have this great idea. We're all loving it. We're all having it. It's working, and we don't get along as much anymore after 20 years. We see things differently, or it could be as simple as my partner loves this. He or she wants to die with their boots on. And you know what? I'm 55 years old. I got plenty of money out of this business. I want to start smelling the roses. I want to travel. I want to spend time with my wife and then our grandkids when they come around. I don't want to be in the business anymore. So what's the plan? How do we deal with that? And the other is distress. Okay, we look at what we just went through in the 2020s when we had COVID. How many businesses got shuttered because of that? What about the Great Recession of 2008? We had that go on where the stock market dropped about 60%. Businesses were shut down. So how do you deal with distress? And so part of it, we talk about is having what they call a buy-sell agreement. And in the buy-sell agreement, these items are really mapped out. So while, let's assume in this case we have partners, all right, let's just make it easier. We have a partner, we start the business, and one of us dies, or one of us becomes disabled. One of us goes through a divorce, or there's a disagreement, or there's distress in the business. While you are agreeing on everything, because you're agreeing to go in the business, you can spell out the terms of what happens if one of us dies, one of us becomes disabled. In a divorce, how does that work? Where, I don't have to be partners with my partner's ex-wife. I can, there's a way to buy that person out. Now, there is insurance that can be used for some of this, especially on death and disability. You're not required to. So let's get that out. You're not required to use insurance. You could set up terms in the agreement where if a partner passes away, I can pay the estate or the spouse over a 10-year period. And here's the formula. We're going to use the value of the business. Or we can just simply say, we're going to hire 2 valuation companies. They're going to value the company. We're going to average that number out, and that's going to be the number we use. The same thing happens with disability. There is what they call disability buyout insurance. It's different than disability income insurance. Disability income insurance is if you can't work, it replaces your salary. Disability buyout insurance actually works where if you can't return to work after 18 months, they use a valuation formula that's baked into the insurance policy, and they're going to basically say, we're going to pay you out this amount of money, and then the shares go back to the partner. Same thing with divorce. There's terminology that the attorney will put in there that the stock has to be redeemed, and the spouse will be bought out so that she is not part of the business. Same thing with disagreement. I just had a client. There were 3 partners, started back in 1997. They're doing great. And it was just like I shared with you earlier. 2 of them still have the gumption to keep going at the business. And the middle partner in an age format decided, hey, enough's enough. I want to golf. I want to go up to my cabin up in Canada and fish. Buy me out. And so they followed the agreement, got the valuation done, structured the payout, and everything went smoothly. The stress is a little more trickier to plan for. Usually you might want to consider putting what they call triggers in. If the company reaches certain, it's kind of like banks having covenants. The bank can come in if you have a loan and the company is not performing at a certain level, that they can kind of come in and step in for the business. Same thing under a distress situation. You might agree that, hey, if our numbers get so bad that we're going to do friendly liquidation and figure out how do we sell the business. So all of this can be mapped out, and if you don't have a buy-sell agreement, and people say, well, wait a minute, I'm a solo practitioner, I'm 100% owner. You can enter into an agreement with for your employees to buy you out. You might have a friendly competitor. I did a lot of work with veterinarians, and veterinarians would have their own practice. And, all the veterinarians is a very tight community and they would know one another. I said, you got to have one that might be a friend of yours or, a business friend that you can enter into an agreement that if either of you get hit by a bus, that you have this agreement to buy their practice. So even under a solo ownership situation, there are ways to put the wheels of motion in place so that you can, transition the business and not leave a hot mess, for your family. And the reason why I bring that up is the numbers kind of bear out. When it comes to exit planning, based on companies called to be profitable, 2/3 of the business owners do not know all their exit planning options. They don't have you can see the numbers. I don't want to read them all, but there's a high number that doesn't have a transition team. There's no written transition plan. 40% of the business owners surveyed don't even have a plan to cover the 5 Ds that we discussed. And half the companies need the company to remain profitable in an event, just to make sure that the needs of the owners are being met. So it is very critical, and I get it. It's kind of like estate planning for the business. We do a lot of work with business owners and individuals on the personal side, and candidly, a lot of people don't want to talk about difficult topics. And on the personal side, people have a challenge talking about, well, I don't want to talk about my death. I don't want to figure out what to do with this and this and this. I go, no one really does. But if you can take control and ownership of it and lay out the terms that you want to have happen, all you're going to do is do a favor for everybody. I've been in situations where I've brought in after the fact where, there was no will, there's no estate plan, there's no business succession planning. And I can tell you, it really is a hot mess. There's a lot of stress, a lot of emotion. Rarely is the value of the business ever realized. And it hurts people. And so I would say in working on your business, this is one of the things that we would really mandate with our clients. Like, listen, hey, this is not like the 10 Commandments where it's etched in stone and never can change. Okay. This is something that you can always change. So it's better to have a plan. And you heard me say earlier, my dad says, make sure you finish what you start. Well, if you start a business, you better know how to finish it. And this is part of knowing how to finish your business. So one sec. So there's definitely different transition options that we talk with private business owners. I would say based on the survey, 1/3 almost are not sure what those transition are or who they want to transition to. I would say based on the study, 21% are going to do it internally to family. They want to bring their kids into the business. And I will say, as a side note, have your kids work someplace else before they come into your business. Even if they work there growing up while they were in high school and even in college, coming back and working there, I think there's an appreciation they have for what is built when they work someplace else. Secondly, it brings in a different eye perspective. I think what happens as business owners, and it is a challenge, and the reason why I think if you go to most professions, they have these conferences, and they bring in speakers to talk about a whole panel of items. But the part of the reason, the benefit I go to when I go to conferences in my industry is I get a different perspective. When I go to a Barron's conference or a Forbes conference and I see wealth advisors that are using different custodians and, running their businesses differently, it gives me a different lens to operate, how to operate my practice and to look at my practice differently. So I feel like when children are part of the succession plan, having them work someplace else and coming back to the business creates not only an appreciation, it creates a different perspective that they can bring to help the business. Because I don't know, a lot of times we get into companies and it's interesting. It's like, well, I ask them, well, why do you do it this way? Well, this is the way we've always done it. I understand that. That's why you're continuing to do it that way. But have you ever looked at a different way of doing it? Innovation is a big part of growing and expanding and dealing with challenges. Stagnation is a quick way to go out of business, because your competitors, if you think about it, your competitors are always trying to figure out a way to take your business. I call it stealing your lunch money. So, even though we've been around 30 years and we're successful and we're confident in what we do, there's this little bit of paranoia in me that always sitting there saying, all right, we got to figure out how to do this better. How do we continually challenge ourselves? Because if we don't, someone else will figure out a better solution. And then once our clients hear about it, they're going to sit there and say, well, wait a minute. Frank's a great guy. His team are great. They take care of us, but this other organization might have a better value prop. And that's the risk all of us run if we're not always looking at our business and challenging, the status quo. The other succession plan, went too fast. Sorry about that. The other is using internal transition to the management team. Listen, I started by myself. Now we have 13 people here. I have a strong management team. So, part of that is looking at, well, my management team, if I mentor and grow them correctly, I can make myself irrelevant and they can eventually take over the business. So that's another option. The thing I will tell you in that is, it's not a light switch. You need to groom, whether it's your children or your management team, you need to groom them for the positions of leadership. So you almost have to do a SWOT analysis. What's their strengths, weaknesses? What's the opportunity? What's the threat if I don't deal with that? And so we need to look at every team member, and they can be a great person, they can be a loyal person, but if I'm grooming someone to be the president of the company and I'm going to eventually transition, I need to know their strengths and weaknesses, and can I, through mentorship and training, get them experienced enough that I can confidently hand over the reins. So all of these transitions to internal people, whether it's family or management, have to be done with a mindset that you have to sit there and say, are they in a position that they can be successful? Have you put them in a position to be successful? There's no guarantees, and you can't teach them everything. There's all this institutional knowledge that's in your organization, and especially if you're the founder, you need to figure out how to make sure that knowledge is best transitioned to those people that are going to step in and fill your shoes. Internally to partners, we talked about that. Your other partners can buy you out if you're ready to get out earlier. ESOPs, that's a discussion for another time. ESOPs are great. They're employee stock ownership plans. And you have to, first of all, have a desire to have the employees become owners. But you usually have to have a certain size. You need to be at around 25, 30 people to diversify the risk. You have to have a certain amount of income, EBITDA, that can pay for this type of transition. There's a lot of benefits, but there's some hoops to go through it. So that's why it's not as popular, because I think there's a lack of understanding, but it also the hoops that you have to go through scare people away. And the balance, the other third, they say 29%, I would just say a third, is an external. I'm going to sell to a financial buyer, a premium buyer, private equity. There's all kinds of third parties that want to come in, because you might not have children. Like I don't have any, I have two daughters. I have a daughter that's great in finance and she works for the Cleveland Clinic. There's no interest in following in dad's footprints. So, if I needed to sell to a third party, that would be, one of those, those options I would consider. So not everyone has an internal transition, whether to management team or partners or to family. So then you have to set the stage. How do I exit through a third party? So all businesses go through, like 5 stages to create value at maturity. First, you identify the value in your business. And we talked about getting a valuation. You need a starting point. You need to know what is your business value is today. And you need to know those strengths and weaknesses. We talked about protecting your business, right? You need to protect for the 5 Ds: divorce, disability, distress, death. Let me ask you, I would be surprised if no one has car insurance, even though it's mandated. Even before it was mandated by the state, they have a certain amount of coverage. Most everyone I talked to had car insurance. Why? Who wants that to lose assets and be sued and pay with personal assets, right? You have house insurance, right? So think about it this way: there's reasons to protect your business, especially if it's your biggest asset. I'm telling you, your business is most likely worth more than your house. So why aren't we protecting it? Then you have to figure out how to, and we're going to get into this part, building value. And you either do it through cash flow. At the end of the day, when you buy a business, unless you're buying certain intellectual property from that business, you're really buying cash flow. So think about it as a building. I'm buying a building. There's going to be some appreciation, but you're buying it for the cash flow that the building is going to pay. So you're going to look at the leases of the building, how long the leases are, how much revenue is generated, and that building's going to get paid more. The other is improving your multiple, and we're going to talk about that. A multiple is you look at your earnings, and then based on how the capital markets view your company, they're willing to pay 3 times your EBITDA, 5 times your EBITDA. So we're going to talk about the key part here is building it. And then harvesting is, we just discussed that. Okay, when it comes time to harvest, how are we planning on exiting? And when is that time for you to exit? I will tell you, most people wait too long to exit their business. So you think about it as a football player. Jim Brown, if you're been here a long time in Cleveland, Jim Brown's considered one of the best football players ever played. He had an argument with Art Modell because he was filming, the movie Dirty Dozen, and he was missing training camp, a couple weeks of training camp, and Modell was going to fine him. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm an all-pro. I've been an all-pro every year, leading rusher. You're going to fine me because I'm doing a movie? He just retired. But he also retired at the peak of his game. A lot of players, wait too long, and they become diminished, and their value on the open market's not as good. I can't imagine, and it's tough. We all have fire in our belly, but I imagine the fire in our belly to grow our business is much bigger and stronger early on than it is in later years. Doesn't mean we don't love our business and we don't work hard in it, but it's like, hey, I'm 60 years old. I want to vacation more. I want to enjoy the fruits of my labor more. And you might not be just putting in the effort, the same amount of effort into the business as you were before. Well, if you think about that, you might have missed the peak value of your company, because now I'm going to go sell my company and my numbers have all dropped a little bit and I missed that peak. So the question for many owners is, are you waiting too long to sell your business because you hung on too long because you thought, I don't have an exit planning strategy, or I'm going to die with my boots on? I mean, that is an exit strategy. We joke with people. Are you planning on dying with your boots on? If you are, that's great. But let's just figure out, if that event happens, people walk in and your feet up on your desk and you're out, what are we going to do with the business? So you can die with your boots on. At least have a contingency plan as to what's going to happen. And then manage. So what I mean by manage is when you convert your illiquid asset, right? The only liquidity about your business is the income it provides you through salary and any distributions. Well, once you sell that business, okay, that business, you have to manage that wealth. And in Cleveland, the MTD family, the family that owned the MTD company, they sold out to Stanley. They already had an interest in the business, and then they bought the remaining interest. Well, that was a $1 billion company. All right. Now that company went from a company to cash. Well, you still got to manage that, right? I mean, there's a lot of responsibility, and there's obviously a lot of family members that were part of that business. So when you liquidate your business, there's a responsibility of how you're going to manage that. So the next slide is a key slide, because this is the process. If you want a good book to read on exit planning, it's called Walking to Destiny. Again, Walking to Destiny. It really talks about a lot of things I'm sharing with you today about how to frame your lens at looking at exit planning as a business strategy, and it gives you a much more in-depth discussion about the various things that we're going to talk about on this flow chart. So there's four gates, 4 sections to this process. The first is, and this is done basically 90-day increments. What you do is it starts with the valuation. We talked about, we don't know what to fix or improve unless we know what we have. So you have to do an assessment. So think about it as, you go down to Cleveland Clinic and you get an executive physical, right? They have this executive physical that's way more in depth than just going to your family doctor. And they're going to tell you, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, this is what's great about you. This is what's good. Just keep an eye on it. But you have some challenges here, and we're going to work on figuring out how to improve your health by putting together a game plan to deal with those things. Again, that's what the valuation will do for you. So the valuation is the starting process, but you also need to figure out what are your personal and business goals, because they have to relate, and you have to figure out, how does this asset, the strengths and weaknesses of this asset, fit what I want to do in my life? What is really the end game, right? I think most of us would agree, most people don't want to die with their boots on. They might want to stay in the business. I've had companies where, the founder would come in just a day or two a week just because they have all this great experience and knowledge and some relationships that they help maintain. But pretty much all the decision making has been moved to another generation. And they're really more the figurehead. So they come in because they have something to contribute, and there's value to them, and keeping their self mentally sharp. And we talk about, with owners, it's very challenging. You think about giving birth to a business, right? All the sweat equity you've put in, all the challenges, the ups and downs, the sacrifices you've had to make in growing your business, not having an exit strategy for yourself. Now, I'm not talking about the business. I'm talking about you, the owner. When you leave your business, what are you going to do with your time? One of the biggest mistakes business owners do is they retire or step away, and they've never thought about, what is it going to look like? What is my day and week going to look like when I'm gone? What am I going to fill that time with? Because I've seen people get depressed, not even business owners, people who work their whole lives and don't have a plan for retirement. And I don't want to even use the word retire, because retire means like you're not doing anything, but you're moving on to a different stage in your life. You're really having a life event. You're stopping in your business or your career, and now you're moving on to a different part. Are you going to do volunteerism? Are you going to serve on boards? Are you going to spend more time with family and grandkids? Are you going to travel with your spouse? But you need to have something in place, because that vacuum of time that your business took up is a big vacuum, right? It's easily 1/3 of your day, if not more. And so now and that's not even the physical time. I don't know about you, but even when I'm not at work, sometimes, I think about work. Something reminds me about work. And so you're never, I think, truly off the clock. Now, that's me. I mean, some people might be, when they're on vacation, they have an ability to really disconnect. For me, I need to get away for at least 2 weeks, and I need not to be in Northeastern Ohio for me to really disconnect. But I mean it seriously, though. You need to think about what life is going to be like when you're not partnered to your business anymore, right? My wife always jokes with me, "Oh, your mistress is your business." Well, there's some truth to that, but given the amount of time I spend in my work. But going back to the first gate, the discovery stage, you look at your goals for the business, yourself as personally, you look at the value of the business, and you got to create a prioritized action plan, because you can't fix everything in 90 days. You can't even fix things in a year. So one of the things we try to tell clients is, you don't want to wait. It's like retirement planning for an individual. Don't come to me at age 61 and I want to retire age 65 and say, "Frank, I want to retire at 65. Can I do it?" Well, I can probably tell you yes or no, but I don't have a lot of time to remedy it. But if you come to me at 40 and say, "I want to retire at 65, and this is what it looks like," if you're not on track, I have time. I have 25 years to get you there. Well, the same thing happens with your business. When you do this valuation and you're looking for a certain value of your company, and you're looking at these personal goals you have, if you start this process early, and I'm going back to being a business strategy, being exit strategy being a business strategy, The earlier you start this process, you have time to move the needle, to remedy anything that needs to be remedied, and also to increase value in the business. I mean, Einstein always used to say, the eighth wonder of the world is the compound value of interest. Well, think about if I have more time to grow my business at a higher rate, what I could do with the value of that business. So the second gate is where you actually look at the values that you lay out, your personal and financial planning, the business improvements, how do you mitigate risk, then you reassess, and then you sit there and say, and the question is always a question you should always ask yourself. Do I continue the business or should I exit? Now people say, well, Frank, I'm 45 years old. Why would I want to exit? What happens if someone, I joke about this, I'm a big movie buff. What happens if someone gives you the Godfather offer? You know, the offer you can't refuse. So I had a client, he was 58 at the time, did not want to retire. Didn't want to retire at all. He was totally content that he was going to work till about 67 because he loves what he does, loves his business, and his mindset was 67. Well, his industry was really being courted by the PE companies, private equity, and they gave him a really amazing offer, like 13 times EBITDA. I'm like, and I told my client, I said, you can't grow your business enough in the next 9 years to make up for this. I would take the burden in hand. Now you can continue to work, and most of the time when you're bought out, companies will want you to stay on for a little time. I would take the money and run. If you know, and sometimes because people ask me, well, what would you do if you're in my shoes, Frank? If you get the Godfather offer, you might want to really think about that. So the reason why you keep asking this question of yourself is, if your company gets to a certain value before you're ready to retire mentally, you might decide, hey, it might make sense for me to sell now. I can go on and do other things. I can start another business. I can do all these things with my time in my life. So always be prepared that if your business gets so successful and you're not at, you know, I think in our society, we're trained to think about retirement when we get into our late 50s and 60s. Why do you have to wait that long? If you can get what you want financially at age 55 or 50, or even, God bless, 45, why not consider it? So this value acceleration methodology I'm sharing with you is the process that you should be doing. This is the looking at exit planning as a business strategy, because it's this rinse and repeat cycle where I value my business on a regular basis. I look at my goals, my values, I assess what we're doing right, what we're not doing right. We put in procedures to make the business better. And then we reassess, okay, the business has grown in more value. Is it time for me to go or not? And you constantly ask yourself that question. So this is the methodology to increase value. And you're going to see why increasing value is important, because it gives you more turns when the private equity markets assess value, they're going to give you a higher value. Instead of giving you a 5 turn on your EBITDA, they're going to give you 7 times or 7 turn on your EBITDA. This is what this value acceleration methodology does. By constantly valuing and reassessing your business, you're put in a position to say, I need to make improvements. If I want to be best in class, I need to be doing things differently. I need to think differently. And so this is really working on your business. The key part is you got to do this. You got to execute it. So as I move on, so we're going to talk about one of the limitations of business owners. And you're going to say, I call it decentralizing the business owner. And many of you probably heard of a book called E-Myth. It's written by Michael Gerber. And basically the punchline of that book is, how do you become dispensable to the business? If you create such a great business where you can step away and the business can work just as great without you, then you've achieved something, I think, pretty special. And so to have that, though, you need to let go of your ego. You need to have a mindset to mentor and grow your people. You have to put in processes. Like one of the things we did here, we use a process called EOS, An Entrepreneur Operating System. It's a book written by Gino Wickman. It's called Traction. Vern Harnish has a book called Gazelles. That's another good one. Another one is Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. And there are consultants out there that are disciples of these books, and they teach the methodology. And they all say the same thing, just differently. So whatever book or process or words appeal to you, I would say, fine, just use something to help you run your business on a process. You have a process to run your business. Another great book I'll share is a book called Top Grading. It's a book by Bradford Smart. It's really creating a hiring process. Let's face it, hiring has become more challenging today. I think employers are at a bigger disadvantage now than they were 10 years ago. We're only as good as our people, and we're only as good as our weakest link. So you need to figure out, how do you develop a process to bring in the best talent. So those are things I want to share with you in regards to looking at your business. Now, things I want to cover here. Oops, I gotta move this slide. So I'm going to talk about, how do we decentralize the business owner. So I want you to pretend, how would you look at an organization when the business owner works more than 55 hours a week, doesn't really have a balanced work life, versus an owner that has a balanced work life, is fulfilled in their work, they have defined processes and purpose, and the business tends not to revolve around them. Let's look at structural capital, your intellectual property, your standard operating procedures. How do you view a company that doesn't really have that? When you go in, everyone's kind of doing everything the way they think they need to do it, because everyone's got their own personal system, versus a company that has a clear vision. They have hiring processes. They have processes to handle their books and records. They have processes to, if you're in the manufacturing business, they have quality control processes. If you're in public accounting, you have processes in how you review books and records and audits of your client. Customer capital. What happens? How do you view a business that all the client relationships revolve around the owner, not the company? How do you look at a company where the customers are more diverse and are centralized to the brand of the company, versus a company that there's only a few clients, and again, they're tied to the personal relationship they have with the owner? So the reality is, that the owner's not there, would those clients be there, right? Next slide here. Same thing from social capital. The culture is really tied to the owner. The culture goes as the owner goes. Where you have another company where the culture is built and it permeates every person, and they embody the culture of the company. It's not revolved around one person, right? The culture is the core. You hire, fire, promote based on your culture. And I mean that. A lot of companies will put, well, this is our culture. These are our values. But if you don't hire, fire, and promote based on your values, I'm going to challenge you that your values are meaningless. Because you need to look at your values as something critical, as a differentiator. And it's not something meant for the outside. I believe your values are meant internally, that every team member embodies that culture and lives that culture. Because if they don't, then my question is, why are they on your team? If they don't embody the values that you've specifically laid out, and you're not hiring, firing, and promoting by those values, then what good are the values? So look at two companies that there's that differentiation. And then it's human capital. Again, all the decisions always have to get the blessing of the owner, versus you have a great management team that is empowered to make decisions, and only certain decisions are maybe reserved for the owner, but they can make all these other decisions without the owner having to always put a stamp of approval. Which organization's better? So the reason why I bring this up is, when someone is going to look at your business, they're going to look at these characteristics, and they're going to say, okay, is this an owner-centric company, or is this company really independent of the owner? And I'm going to ask you, what would you pay more money for? Would you pay more money where the business revolves around the owner, or does it revolve around the company, the brand, the team, the people? Because once that owner's gone, the risk to you is if you have a company that everything revolves around that owner, you have a high risk acquisition, because if that owner leaves, you'll keep them on for a year, maybe year and a half to transition. But if that owner leaves, you have a lot of risk, where I think in the second hand, you won't. So that's where we talk about, the business value and ultimate sales price. At the end of the day, this will all come down to business value and ultimately, the sales price you have on the organization. I'm going to pick up the speed here because I got a couple more slides I want to get, and I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. So the next 2 slides I want to cover are the remaining key slides, and there's 2 other ones I have to go through, and we'll be good. So when you look at a company, and going back to Warren Buffett, you have your financial statements, and a company's when a valuation person looks at your company, usually there's a value associated, maybe 1 to 2 times the value of the books and records. Where value is really earned is in those areas I talked about: human capital, customer capital, structure, and social capital. That's the intellectual property of that company. That's the secret sauce that makes your company different than the company down the street, right? Everyone has a secret sauce. And it's really those 4 areas. That's the lever that increases your multiple. So why is it one company that's doing 10 million in sales and another company doing 10 million in sales? Why are they getting different offers? It all comes down to the intangible assets. That's where the value of your company comes from. That's what people are willing to pay more money for. And so you need to figure out, how are you going to improve your human capital, your customer capital, your structure capital, and your social capital? That is the biggest lever in determining value in your company. So how does this all come together? This is probably another really key slide to learn. There's 3 gaps you need to learn. There's called the wealth gap, the profit gap, and the value gap. So the wealth gap is really your personal financial statement. So as I told you before, your business is usually a big value of your enterprise. So if you're counting on your business for your retirement, you better well know what that number is going to be. So if you sit down with your financial advisor and, based on how you live and how you spend money, how you're going to be spending money, if you need your company to sell at 15 million or 20 million, and your company's only going to sell at 10, you're going to have a wealth gap, and you're not going to be able to meet the needs that you have articulated in your financial plan. So you got to start with your wealth gap. You need to understand what your business needs to sell for at some point to fulfill all these things on your bucket list, as they say. Your profit gap is how your company compares to a best-in-class company. And how is your EBITDA, which is your earnings before interest, dividends, depreciation, and amortization? Your EBITDA has to get normalized. So let me take a step back. Normalization means, do we take out any personal expenses from the calculation? Are there any one-time anomalies to the business that we have to take out? Is the owner really being paid too much, which is not uncommon, that the owner gets to a certain point where, hey, they're getting paid a lot of money because of longevity, and I can get someone else to come in and do his or her job for a lot less. But your profit gap is the gap you have because you're not performing as best in class. And the last is what they call your value gap. Because you're not performing well in the profit gap, companies that are going to buy you are going to offer you less. So I'm gonna take you through a little example here to illustrate that this argument is not an additive argument. Or linear. It's a multiplication argument. So we sit down and we do your financial plan, and we say, your net worth is, you need $25 million to do what you want to do, right? That's the nut that you want to make everything happen. But you only have $5 million in investable assets. The rest is tied up in your business, and you don't know what your business is worth. Well, we have two companies here. You have a business that's doing 10 million in sales, and another company that's best in class doing 10 million in sales. Your company is only doing $2 million in EBITDA, while the best in class is doing $3 million in EBITDA. Well, guess what? The marketplace, which is determined by the private equity companies and the market, what are willing buyers willing to offer a company like yours? I'm only going to give your company a 5 times the multiple. Well, 2 times 5, that's $10 million. So in using my financial example, you have a wealth gap because now I only have a $10 million asset, my business, plus my 5 million. I'm at 15 million. I'm short $10 million. Now I operate and I go through all this process and I become best in class. My $3 million company in EBITDA gets a 7 turn. I'm willing to pay more because it's a better performing company, and rightfully so. If you're just like anything, it's a meritocracy. If you're better at something, you should be paid more for something. So you're going to get 7 times, and 7 times 3 is 21. And guess what? 21 and 5 is 26. I'm golden. I'm in a good spot. So understanding your wealth gap is your personal financial plan. What do you need? Your profit gap, again, is because you're not operating best in class, your EBITDA is not as high as it should be compared to the peer group. And because of that, you're going to get a value gap. In other words, you're not going to make as much money in the open market if I go to sell your company. I have 2 last slides and we'll, I think, wrap it up here. So real quick, the whole process here is, when I talk about looking at exit planning as a business strategy, is really to create a clear plan. I think people look at exit strategy as something I do at the end. And I'm telling you, the earlier you start exit planning strategy, you will not only create less stress in your life, you'll work on your business, you'll create more intrinsic value to your business, and you'll probably be able to step away from your business earlier than you think. It creates a much more balanced lifestyle because you're going to start to find out that to create a balanced lifestyle, I have to create a team that I can unload responsibility to and grow my team. And if I can grow my team, I can step away. You should be able to go take a vacation for a month and come back, and you should not be missed. That's a good indication that you got a good run organization. But if you can't even leave for a week and then you come back and your desk has 3 feet of papers on it, then I'm going to challenge you that, your systems are probably not where they need to be, or you don't have the right people, or any of those key indicators that I talked to you about. You need to have a team, and I'll show you a team slide at the end here. Depending on the complexity of your team, yes, most people have a CPA firm and a lawyer and someone they call a financial advisor. But the more complex your business is, the bigger your business, you might need other members of that team. And this whole process does create added value. At the end of the day, if your business asset, your company is your biggest asset on your balance sheet, you need to treat it as such. It's called building and protecting wealth. And this is the way you build and protect your wealth. If your business is your biggest asset, and we have clients we invest very successfully for. And part of the reason why they give us money to invest is they want to de-risk away from the company. They don't want everything tied to the company. But if you have a great company that's growing well, as good as I am as an investment advisor, I can't duplicate your growth rate. If you're really good at your company, I usually can't duplicate your growth rate. My job is to de-risk and not have everything tied to the business. It's like investing in the markets. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So what your team looks like, again, is all based on the complexity of the situation. I mean, I've had situations where we've had to have a family therapist get involved because of family dynamics. There's a lot of family working in the business. You might need to have, obviously, a valuation expert. If your company's big enough, you might have a family enterprise advisor, kind of like what I call a family office. So your complexity will dictate the team. The thing is, pay for good advice. What I find is, people will trip over a dollar to save a penny. And, what they end up doing is missing the opportunity to get great advice that can put them in a better position. With that, I am finishing a minute early. If there's questions, I'd like to help address any questions. But it's been a very great pleasure and an honor to speak and hopefully provide some good nuggets of information for you to take back and to really look at your business differently and integrate these ideas into your working on the business attitude.
Thank you, Frank. And if anyone does have any questions, please type them in the box. We did have one question. Do you mind repeating your book recommendations for us?
Okay. Yeah, let me go back to the slide because I did write them down. I don't have them all memorized. So E-Myth is one of the books I would recommend you getting. Walking to Destiny is an exit planning book. Top Grading is another book that talks about hiring process. Gino Wickman wrote the book on EOS. Then there is, let me think about, because I can't find the slide real quick. Gazelles by Vern Harnish. That's another good one. And then The Rockefeller Habits is another good one. So those are the books I mentioned. E-Myth, Top Grading, Walking to Destiny, EOS, Gazelles, and then Rockefeller Habits. So yeah, those are the books I would recommend you look at. I mean, I would on those three, I would say the Rockefeller Habits and EOS are the two I liked out of the three. Gazelles was pretty good, but it didn't work. I mean, Top Grading is a tough book, but it's a good book because it gives you the items on how to create a hiring process. You will never hire someone again the same way. It is amazing the questions and the procedures they put you through. But when you think about what it costs you when you make a bad hire, I mean, it costs you in customer capital. It creates culture problems in the office. Obviously, you don't get the productivity. So invest in a hiring process. If I give you one thing to start with, I would start with a good hiring process because good people is one of the key things to decentralizing the owner, from the business. So that would be, I would probably start there. And then the second book I would probably get would be either Rockefeller Habits or Gino Wickman on traction.
Great. And does anyone have any other questions for us? Does not look right now. So I did get asked if this will be recorded. This is absolutely recorded, and we will be posting it on social media as well on our YouTube page. So you can find it there. Well, I appreciate everyone joining us today. And Frank, thank you so much. This is really valuable information, and
Thanks, Pamela.
I think it's really important.
Well, put it to good use. Don't the key thing here is hope is not a strategy. So take take one thing and try to get it, try to read a book or try one thing in the next 90 days. You got to learn how to walk before you run. So it's not something you're going to do all at once. So just pick one thing to try to do in the next 90 days and start building some momentum, and you'll see that it'll start to have an effect on you. All right.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. God bless everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.